Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. That feeling starting to kick in, knowing who I'm on the track with.
Hey now, it's the Mike and JD Show, and I am your host, Mike Gilbert. It's kind of a Mike and JD show. This will not be a numbered episode. This is going to be a unique, a very special episode because, as most of you guys are aware, earlier this week on Tuesday, my son Elijah entered the world. He was born 6 pounds, 7 ounces, my little guy. He was a little bit early, 17 days early. Not too bad, though. My daughter was like 10 days early, so kind of right around. I think my wife just processes kids faster. I don't know, she's like an alien. I don't know what's going on with her, but we were actually worried that he was going to come way earlier, and she was able to hold on to the little guy until it was safe. And so he's out, he's safe. Mom and baby are still at the hospital. We had to have a C-section, not to get too graphic and to get into detail or too personal. But I can assure you that everybody is doing okay. They're just going to keep them in there for a little bit longer for some extra observation, and they had to run like lab tests. And it's a military hospital, so we had the baby at Tripler, and so and they did a great job, by the way. But because we're on an island, there's some like limitations with some of the labs around here, so I think they had to like ship off some samples. Well, so anyway. Regardless, everybody's healthy, but they just might have to stay in the hospital for a little bit longer. So my daughter and I have been part-time in it at the hospital. So we came home last night, Wednesday night, and we did our whole bedtime routine. I put her down, and then here I am up early before she wakes up. She'll be up in like maybe an hour or so, and then I'm going to take her to school, and then I'm going to head over to the hospital to join my wife and my new son. And I'll spend the day over there, and then we'll do the whole thing again tomorrow. But so anyway, that was a little bit of a boring intro. JD was going to attempt to go ahead and go live tonight and have a special guest host, but the special guest host couldn't lock down, and then he just ended up having like a bunch of other stuff pop up, so he's not going to be able to record live. And I'm like, well, I'm home. Right now, I won't be home tonight when it would be time to record. And even if I did, like I'm single dadding it at the house, so I wouldn't be able to do it anyway. So I was like, I'll just record something for the Voices of Wrestling, and then for the Patreon audience. And so Patreon, if you're here, thank you very much for subscribing. I greatly appreciate it. I have another mouth to feed, so that's helpful. But I didn't want to like not have something for you guys. So here's what's going to happen. So Patreon, you guys already got the content that we're going to drop today. And it's the JD and I, which we recorded on Sunday night. We recorded overtime, and we did a whole special about the Vince McMahon docuseries. So by Sunday, JD and I both had the opportunity to watch it. And it got heated between us because JD hated the thing, and I was like, I thought this thing was pretty good. It's like, but I also don't get upset when people bullshit me. It's like I'm able to regulate my emotions about that stuff. It just doesn't upset me. In fact, I happen to be entertained by it. So I like it when people like Hogan and Vince and all those people they're lying, because I know I can tell. But I also like it when you have other people like Dave Meltzer and Bret Hart and Tony, like all these other people, Bischoff actually calling bullshit. So that whole thing entertained me, and I think a lot of people were more upset that they didn't go into detail about the more salacious stuff. than I was. I was just happy that they did it. So anyway, we actually got into a pretty heated debate, and then we have to tell some fun stories. JD tells the story of the time he met Chris Benoit, and that turns out to be a pretty funny story. So stay tuned for that. So so you guys listen on the Voices of Wrestling Network, and you guys are going to get to hear that, which was on the Patreon earlier this week. Overtime, Mike and JD discussing the Vince McMahon docuseries. But I'm not going to not give you guys some fresh content because, man, oh man, we have been covering the AEW TV deal story for 2 years. It's literally been 2 years, like since JD and I were back on Fight Game Media, and I think we were still braced for Impact, and we were discussing this freaking TV deal and what it would look like and this and that, because rumors have been going around for a long time. And the whole one Bill Phil stuff and everything, well, it's finally here. We've been covering it. I feel like it's been almost every week now since like the beginning of this year, but we have been covering off and on for almost 2 years now. And so I'm like, and the news broke yesterday while I was in the hospital. I was like, damn it. I like, this is our time to shine. We need to be able to record, but obviously we just couldn't. So I am not going to let a full week go by without discussing this with you guys. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break it down right now. Patreon, I'm going to just upload this as a separate audio file, so you guys will just have that. And Voices of Wrestling, I'm going to talk about the TV deal right now, and then we're going to get right into the Vince McMahon docuseries recap from JD and I. So let's go ahead and discuss it. So our long national nightmare is over. AEW's new TV deal with Warner Brothers Discovery officially announced, and Rampage. Our national nightmare is over because also Rampage got canceled, which I might be the only one happy about that. I don't know why I'm happy. I never watched the thing, but I just feel like its existence was getting on my nerves. So, yeah, it's one of those weird things. Like, why would you be happy that something you didn't watch is no longer on TV? And I'm just like, I don't know. That's not a very mature thing to do, but I just like the fact that it was there just annoyed me because it felt like it was unnecessary. But AEW is essentially becoming a bit of a content farm, much like WWE is. And so, Rampage is gone. So let me get into some of the details. So after 2 years of speculation, AEW officially signed a multi-year media rights deal with Warner Brothers Discovery, ending what many fans, including myself, dubbed a long national nightmare of waiting. The new deal, which sees Dynamite and Collision remaining on TBS and TNT, also brings major changes, including cancellation of Rampage, AEW's third show, according to Variety. So this is where things get a little weird. So Variety, they were the first ones to announce it. So this was definitely Variety's like that, Hollywood type publication. And so that's where they wanted to go there with it to get the announcement out there to make it seem like it was a very big deal. And it is. But according to Variety, the deal is reportedly valued at $150 million per year. But Sports Business Journal suggesting that the number is closer to 170 annually. And then to add another interesting layer, Sports Business Journal is also stating that WBD will get to keep its equity stake in AEW, which that's never been reported. It's been rumored for years. I know they've asked Tony. He's never denied it. So I think it's pretty safe to say that, WBD owns a small equity stake. And I think Dave Meltzer on his podcast last night stated that they do. Okay, so that was the first thing I wrote. But then there was an update that came out a little bit later. It said WrestleVotes is now saying that according to a source close to the situation, AEW's new deal with WBD is closer to $185 million a year, not the previously reported 150 or even, I guess, 170. Andrew Zarian also went to Twitter and confirmed that. And then I believe Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio. Now, forgive me, I have not listened yet because, like I said, I just got up. But it says that he also believes that it's $150 million per year, $185 million per year. And Dave went on Wrestling Observer Radio. I'm going to pull up this Trevor Dame guy's tweet. I think Trevor Dame is like buds with some of the wrestling or the Voices of Wrestling dudes, but he actually had like a little bit of a recap, and for the life of me, it sounded a lot like Steiner math. so all right. I'm gonna see if I could pull up his tweet. But man, oh man. So Dave says the AEW deal averages out to 185 million a year over 3 years. It's less than 185 in year 1, and it's more than 185 in year 3. But altogether, it's 555 million total over 3 years. And then if WBD picks up the 4th option year on this deal when the time comes, that is a set price that would be way up. So yeah, typically whenever there's an option, even whenever it's like you have signed like a talent contract, or like if you're in sports, like a player contract, that option year, if you pick that up, they're automatically going to get a raise. So that makes sense. Dave presumes, we're not 100% sure, but figures it likely, given the price WBD is paying in this new deal, that any money that is made from people who buy AEW pay-per-views through HBO Max, that money will then go to WBD rather than AEW. So, and then he goes on to kind of do a full tweet stream. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. So everybody listen to Wrestling Observer Radio for more of those details. Okay, let's go back to the story. So factoring in the upcoming Shockwave show and some of their pay-per-views, the total value of their deals could average around $200 million per year, which is a pretty big deal for a company that's just 5 years old. Along with its flagship programming staying on TBS and TNT, AEW will expand its presence by streaming live on Warner's Max platform starting in January 2025. So, Collision and Dynamite, while it's airing on TNT, will also air at the same time on Max, which is 100% necessary for them to be able to succeed. I actually think that's going to help grow the product quite a bit. I believe so, because Max is a pretty big like streaming service. It's not as big as Netflix and it's not as big as Peacock, but I think it's like right there behind those two. This shift will allow U.S. subscribers to access live AEW programming as well as on-demand content, opening up a new digital front for the company and ensuring broader accessibility for fans. Let's see. The new deal also includes enhanced distribution rights across social media platforms, further integrating AEW into Warner Brothers Discovery broader content ecosystem. Starting later in 2025, AEW live pay-per-views will debut on Max at a discounted rate, offering additional premium content exclusively on the streaming service. Despite the cancellation of Rampage, which will soon come off the air, AEW is moving forward with Shockwave, a new show that is currently being pitched to other networks, likely to end up on a Fox-affiliated station, possibly the Fox broadcast station itself. There's rumors out there that maybe Tuesday or Thursday. If I were them, I would want Tuesday, because there's the Thursday you'll be going up against NFL. And Tuesday would take you head to head with NXT, and that would be fun. That would be fun for me. But I'm curious as to what the Shockwave show would even be about. But if it's on Tuesday on Fox, it's gonna kick NXT's ass, and I think that would make for some fun content. So now if it goes on Thursday, it'll people are like, oh, it's gonna go up with TNA too. It's like, no, like TNA's on Access, and that wouldn't matter. People watch TNA when they get to it, so most people aren't even watching right when it airs. So it's not really a big deal. So Dave Meltzer added more context to the financial details, noting that the deal spans 3 years with an option with 4th. Yeah, I already said that, with a significant price increase. So yeah, that was the story. I posted that story on Patreon. Then of course, more information has come out, but I am just so elated that this freaking TV deal was announced. And I got to give a big shout out to our boy, BJ Bethel, who has had this story on the nose from the beginning. He has been all over the story for months. We have had him on the show several times, and he has never wavered. He said that Max would be a part of it. He, figured it, like his number was like in between 170 and like 200, which is like, okay, that's a wide margin, but still, like, he nailed it. 185, right? He said, 170, 200 for months. I think like back in June. And he said when it's all figured in, it'd be around 200 million a year, and he's completely nailed it. So I think everybody should give BJ Bethel a shout out. Andrew Zarian's been all over the story for a long time too. He's done a very good job, and of course Dave and Sean Rossap and everybody. But I'm just so glad that it's over, that we don't really have to talk about it. We don't have to worry about it. The grifters will find their next grift, and I think I'm going to have a segment coming up on that, about what their next grift would be. I'm pretty excited about that. We'll see. Poor Alfred, man, Cheeseboard. What did old Cheeseboard say? He said something that it was like the saddest thing in the world. Like, this guy's really going through it. So Alfred Kanua the guy writes for Forbes. He writes for, like, that's a big publication, and he is such a loser. Like, he is just tweeting through it. He is having a lot of trouble with this. So let me go back to his tweet. I quoted it. Yeah. So AEW finally announced this new TV deal, setting up a beautiful utopia where wrestler pay will skyrocket. Sadly, AEW is in a tough spot where they're making more money but are less relevant than ever. So he's like, they make more money but they still suck. Man, it's like, so that's like the new grift. It was like, yeah, okay, they're making money but they stink. It's the saddest thing. Like, and I wonder what Eric Bischoff's gonna say. That's gonna be curious to me. Look, not everybody's completely wrong about the state of AEW right now. Their ratings, it seemed like they're a little bit steady the last couple months, but they have been in a more significant decline than the rate of attrition through the loss of cable homes, right? But them streaming on Max is probably going to balance out. Now, we'll probably never get those numbers. The only way we'll get those numbers if they're like astronomical, right? And WBD wants to publicize them. But TV ratings have not been great. Collision and Rampage specifically, not great. I know they've had spikes here and there, but for the most part, they're usually pretty bad. Ticket sales are way down year over year. All those things are absolutely true. The TV show itself feels less important than ever, like as far as like must-see TV, and making sure that I have to watch it every week. It just doesn't feel that way anymore like it used to. So I think the feeling that kind of feeling is essentially gone. And they're bringing a lot of more sports entertainment elements into it, which was what they've railed against, forever. So there's a lot of problems as far as what the on-screen product is, but as far as the structure of the company and the business as a whole, there's not that many. Like, they're fine. They're fine. They're making so much money that nobody really. They're not exactly dummy proof. Like, look, this TV deal is 3 years. With an option year for a fourth year. That option year could be denied and they could be out on their ass in 3 years. I doubt that's going to happen. But, I think that is going to be the next grift. Is that the countdown clock to when they get canceled by WBD after 3 years. Like, I think that's what people are going to be saying next. And again, look, it remains a possibility. Anything is possible. But I don't see it. I feel like they've been a pretty smashing success for WBD. And also WBD got a little bit of a sweetheart deal here. Hold on, swig of coffee for WBD. They're paying a lot of money for it, but they're getting a lot in return. And especially being able to put the stuff on Max, which is where everything's going to be going streaming wise. And not only that, they're part owners of the company. They have an equity stake. So the more successful AEW is, the more successful WBD is in return. Like, they have an equity stake in the company. I think AEW got a good deal. So did WBD, and WBD gets to get out at 3 years if this thing goes sideways. And that's also a good deal for them. So I think all around, like, this one of those weird things where both sides definitely won. And that's cool, man. That's cool. All right, let me get to this last couple of news bits here, and then I'm going to call it a day. So Patreon subscribers, thank you for being here. And then thank you to the Voices of Wrestling Network. I really appreciate you. Just so you guys know, I'm going to be on paternity leave I could be on paternity leave for up to 3 months. I think I'm only going to take 2. I'll probably take 2. And then that way I can bank some time. So in the military, you get 12 weeks of maternity leave for dads, and just for bonding time and help out mom and all that stuff. And I think it's great, and it's just part of the perks of being in the military, right? But if you don't want to use it all at once, what you could do is you can kind of break that up over a 1-year period. So I think I'm gonna take 2, and then I'm gonna bank the rest of the month and kind of use it over the course of the next 12 months. So might take a week here and there, or I might just take like a month off next spring or something, maybe do some traveling. And so we don't exactly know what we're going to do, but since I'm going to be on paternity leave for a little bit, and we're going to have the baby, the weekly show is still going to be around. It might just look a little bit different for a while until we get our routine down. But what that also means is I'm going to be home a lot. I'm going to be going crazy. So it means that there's probably going to be way more Patreon content than ever. So now is a good time to subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/the Mike and JD show. I'm going to be back this coming up weekend with a TNA Q&A. It probably won't be live, but I'll probably record it Saturday or Sunday, and I'll get it out. And the free tier. So I actually have a free tier. I've been posting a lot of stuff. I do some like aggregate article type stuff, but I really don't like to call it aggregate because I actually post my own opinions, and aggregate articles typically don't. So I do try to make it my flavor. So I do a lot of that stuff on the free tier. And then this weekend on the free tier, the TNA Q&A show for Brace for Impact will be there, because TNA has decided to take a week off. So Brace for Impact is going to look a little different this week. So I'm going to do a Q&A show, and then the audio will be available for everybody that is a subscriber, free or paid. And then for those of you paid, get ready for a lot more content, because I'm just going to be cranking out a ton of stuff. Now, before I go, let me get to some more news. Shelton Benjamin debuted on AEW Dynamite last night, and it is also confirmed by Sean Ross Sapp that Bobby Lashley is All Elite. He has signed a contract. He'll probably be debuting imminently. So, but yeah, Shelton debuted in a segment with MVP last night, as MVP looks to build up his Hurt Syndicate. He will be a part of that. So let's get to the Sean Ross Sapp report. Another member of the Hurt Syndicate is officially all Elite. Fightful Select Sean Ross Sapp reported in September that MVP, Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley were all in talks with AEW, but the deals had not been finalized. However, following MVP's debut on Grand Slam, it was confirmed by Fightful that he signed a contract. Now the same goes for Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley, the latter of which has an impending debut. We're told that the three all nailed down their deals a number of weeks ago. MVP is expected to primarily serve as a manager with Shelton and Bobby Lashley wrestling. So there you go. So they'll be wrestling. Also, a couple of other news bits from AEW last night. There was a couple of injuries. So the word making the rounds among AEW talents this morning is that Kelly Madan, who was knocked out at the end of her match with Lady Frost last night in Pittsburgh, suffered a concussion and was alert and coherent after going to the hospital, which thankfully was right next to the Peterson Event Center. Madan, I've never heard of this. Sorry. I don't mean to disrespect her. I just don't know who it is. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Madan was taken out of the ring on a stretcher last night, but we were told that she did not suffer any other injuries. We wish her a quick. Okay. And then the belief is Sammy Guevara also suffered a concussion last night against Serpentico. So yeah, he was stretchered out too. He was knocked out during his match, and but looks like he is okay. So looks like he is going to be just fine too. But a couple of concussions, so that is wild. So hopefully they they return, and that was all during the Ring of Honor tapings. So it's kind of crazy. Oh yeah, Ring of Honor not going to be on True TV as of right now, so kind of status quo there. That's also what Dave reported. So that just triggered my brain to make me think of it. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being Patreon subscribers, and thank you for supporting us on the Voices of Wrestling Network. We greatly appreciate it. And that is going to do it for me on this special edition. Not a numbered episode, just an episode. That's going to do it for me this time. And until next time, mahalo. Hey, now it's overtime with Mike and JD. I'm your host, Mike Gilbert. What's up, JD?
I think I need to redo the animations because I really like the new logos
Yeah.
and they need to be tweaked. And currently in my higher level graphics classes, I got kids doing After Effects work. So I think I could scab off one of them and tell them, hey, you need to make me an animation for my podcast because I told you to.
Yeah.
So I think I need to do that.
Okay, well, I'll send you over the images. I'll email them to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, we definitely need one for the Mike and JD show and for this one. And then I need to update like that logo up in the top left. I need to
Yeah.
swap that over. Yeah.
Do you have just the circular logo?
So I'll be honest right now. It's so funny because well, ladies and gentlemen, JD was a few minutes late because the computer crapped out on him.
I did have a computer.
I was trying to do that because on the iPhone you can just hold your finger on the button and then it'll cut out the background and make it transparent for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, on this logo, it's so complicated it actually doesn't do that. And so I send it to my wife who happens to be editing photos as we speak. I said, hey, can you make this a transparent image? Just all I want is the globe, the microphone, and the Mike and JD show. So she said she'll just knock it out for us.
Oh, it's super easy in Photoshop. You just you do an object select, boom, click on it, and then you go to make a new project, transparent background, boom, boom, slap, slap, and then you make it PNG.
Yeah, I just can't access the Photoshop on this computer for some reason because we have two different profiles on the computer, and it's on my wife's profile. And me trying to run it at the same time, I don't think this computer has enough memory anymore. It's an old computer. It's from 2017. Okay. So it's probably time to upgrade the old MacBook here to get something new.
Yeah, mine's getting a little bit older too, and it's a little scary. I got a laptop for school that I don't really want to use for personal stuff, but you know, I'm in the same boat right now, so I don't want to. Like everything's been good.
Yeah,
you never know. Because we bought tons of extra processor power on this thing, so but you never know. So like I said, send me stuff too, man. I work at a school and I'm on Photoshop all day long.
Yeah. No, I definitely will. It's just my wife. So we bought her one of those iPads with like the pen, so she can do photography. So that's what she does, that because it's so much easier for her to use the pen on certain things. There's other things she has to use a computer for, more complicated stuff, but for the most part, quick touch-ups, she can just use her tablet to do some of her photography. Now that she's no longer in school, once she has the baby, I think she's going to take some gigs again by the end of the year.
Yeah, I could see that. I had a lot of friends that draw comics and stuff like that, and a lot of them are using the iPad with it's like the stylus is modeled off of Cintiq, which is like drawing on, digitally essentially. So like it really does a good job mirroring that. And the new Photoshop, man, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it, especially you'd love it with like AI tools.
Yeah.
That's our next lesson actually is AI.
Yeah. I think every system going forward is going to have some type of AI component
for sure,
which is smart. I'm like, you got to adapt with the world.
There's so much anti-AI sentiment in any type of an art community that because it was trained rather unethically, and I can admit that, but at this point, the genie is out of the toothpaste tube, so like there's nothing you can really do about it. It's either kind of get on board or like get left behind.
It's adapt or perish, right? It's one of those. It's one of those deals.
So I mean, like I got to teach the kids how to do it because like I'm a hypocrite. Like I do a bunch of AI stuff too. So I mean, I don't know, man. It's a super hot button issue right now. So I feel like you got to learn it. Like I told you, my new plan, I'm gonna start it this week. So we'll see how that goes on.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. So, man, I had something for the start of the show and I already forgot it.
Pooched it. Sorry, man.
No, it's all good. So tonight go ahead.
Real quick. Friday, I got third period class, right? I told you at the regular show that I had a kid, like I rearranged his Photoshop brush, I held him out and I said, Cody goes here, Roman goes here. He goes, oh, you like pro wrestling? I'm like, yeah. I said, you should Google me in pro wrestling sometime. So I just said it offhandedly, thinking he'd find my articles and stuff like that. He comes in Friday morning, leans over my desk and goes, hey, Mr. Oliva, I watched your podcast last night.
Oh, no.
And this is what I said. I said, did you really? He's like, yeah, you guys are really good. I said, well, thanks, but don't tell anybody. I can't get fired yet. I don't have tenure. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. How much is your Patreon? And I was like,
oh, man.
Well, $5 a month gets you access to. And he's like, that's cheap. I know people do like $20 a month. And I'm like, not us. So perhaps we found a new patron. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with this one.
That's so funny. My wife was at lunch today with two of her friends, and they were like, she goes, they want to listen to your podcast. I go, no. She goes, why not? I go, because their husbands are also in the military. I was like, look, this is my nerd stuff, and I said, you guys can just leave me the hell alone. It's just like legit my words. It's like, you guys just leave me alone. I don't share the podcast on Facebook because that Facebook is for family and Twitter is for bullshit, and that's where I share that stuff. So
I'm of the same mind, but I had to share our big news on Facebook for the handful of people who would appreciate it. So, I mean, there weren't many. I didn't get many likes because I'm sure most people didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But for those that knew,
yeah.
Right.
So that's what I wanted to start the show off with. I remember now. So JD and I have been trying for 2 years now to become Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame voters. And we actually did.
Mostly Mike. I had no hope this would ever happen. Like, I'm like, he's never going to let us do this.
Well, last year we did a couple of episodes on the Hall of Fame. Like, we did a whole preview show where we basically submitted our ballot. If we were to have a ballot, this is what we would submit. We did a show like that. And when the Hall of Fame got announced, we actually kind of ran down like some of the people that made it. We didn't really go too in detail after that because we had already talked about them ahead of time. And so I did that. We did that show and I submitted it to Dave Meltzer last year. And I think it was just too late. I don't think it was like he didn't think we were worthy. I think it was just too late because he was probably already pretty aware of us by that point because we've been working with Garrett so much. We had already done shows on the network. I'd already done 2 episodes of Fight Game, and I'd done a couple episodes with Josh Nason, and JD had already been on there before. So like we've been on the network, and we have enough friends that know Dave that I was like, I don't think he's slighting us in any way.
I've had lunch with Dave twice.
Yeah, you've met him. I've met him. So like, and we've interacted several times. Me and him got in that whole controversy over Baron Corbin years ago. Like,
that's right.
Yeah, he wrote about me in his newsletter at one point. So like he's aware of us. Okay, not that we're like on his mind all the time, but he just knows who we are. So we talked to Joe Lanza and Rich, and then we also plugged John Muse. We said, hey man, can you just shoot Dave an email? Now I don't know that Joe and Rich sent an email, but I can confirm that John sent one. And he sent an email over, and then just last night, out of the blue, because I heard that the ballots were going out, John was like, "You just email him." So I went ahead and just sent him an email. I shared our show from last year about the Hall of Fame, and within minutes, I got a reply with my ballot. It was that easy.
You told me that, and so we were staying at a hotel, right? And I had to walk the dog at 1 a.m. So I looked at my phone while I was half asleep walking the dog outside the hotel, and I saw your text saying, email Dave. And I wrote like the most incomprehensible 1 a.m. email of all time. And I woke up the next morning, did I really do that? I'm like, oh man. And then I got the ballot. I'm like, holy shit, we stuck the landing on this one. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. We also got a credit to another friend of ours, old Jeremy Feinstone. I know texted Dave and also told him he should give us a ballot. So we did have some angels looking out for us. So
I didn't know about Feinstone. Really? I did not know that. He didn't tell me that.
Yeah, he did. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you that, but I did. So
yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate that.
Good dude. We have good friends.
Yeah, good friends that advocate for us. So, you know what? I know it's weird that actually means a lot to me, but it really does. Like I've been wanting a vote for a long time.
Having good friends or having the vote?
I don't care about my friends. I just wanted the vote. Like I'm cool with just like using everybody around me to get what I want. No, I'm just kidding. No, like it means a lot to me that, that we've done good enough work in podcasting and writing and stuff like that. And we've worked on a couple of different networks with various people, and they thought enough of us to put in a good word for Dave. That means a lot. And it also means a lot that I get a vote this year because you know what? Look, I'm not the greatest historian out there, but I do feel like I'm more qualified than some other people that got votes. So hell yeah.
I definitely feel like I'm more qualified as a historian than a lot of people who get votes. No, I've been writing about this since 2019. Like, so it's been a good 5 years. I've been doing stuff for various, platforms. And I feel, I'm definitely more of a podcaster now than a writer, but I feel like we're deserved. Like, I don't feel like this is crazy. My wife is like, not proud of me, but she's like very happy that I'm happy. It was one of those things like, oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you, sweetie. Like that's what
It's kind of like when my wife comes home on Sunday and she goes, "Hey, did the 49ers win?" And I just tell her all about the game, and she's like texting her friends at the same time, like she doesn't care. And then she goes, "Oh, that's great, honey.
That's so
Congratulations, your football team won."
I'm happy for you. Yeah, that's we are on vacation this week, and that's what I got. I'm like, I got a vote in the Hall of Fame. She's like, what does that mean? I told her, and she's like, oh, is it going to cost us any money? I said no. She's like, oh, okay,
That's a good
great.
question. That's a typical wife question right there. Is it going to cost you money? Because I know that you're like me. You spend some money on some pretty stupid shit that involve wrestling.
Shit. Yes, like. Yeah, I don't even want to think about it over the years. The amount of dumb money I've spent on tickets, and like, dude, it was her idea to go to that indie lucha show, I call it like last month. She's like, oh, we should take Andy to this little lucha show in town, and I was like, oh, this will be lame. Yeah, we'll have fun. There was CML guys all over this little in the park show. I couldn't believe it. We had a blast.
Yeah.
It was her first 26 years we've been together, and I finally got her to go to a wrestling show.
Yeah. Well, so the reason why we're here on a Sunday night, and if you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you. If you're a Patreon subscriber and you want to, you think that somebody would like our stuff, but they don't have the cash, let me know, because Patreon has different discount options out there for like a month. I did put out a promo code, so if you're already listening to this, it doesn't apply to you because you're already subscribers. But so if you know somebody that would like to jump on board and just give us a shot for a month for a single $1, just shoot me a DM or email me right here on Patreon and let me know, and I can shoot you the info to send to them. But I did put out a promo code last night on Twitter, and somebody did take us up on that, so that was cool. So we had a free subscriber take us up on that. So because I've been putting a bunch of stuff on the free tier too, just articles and things like that. And so thank you guys. We're trying to grow the brand here, trying to grow the Patreon, and to keep this ship going. But the reason why we're here on Overtime is JD was able to finally watch the 6-hour docuseries, Mr. McMahon on Netflix. I told everybody my thoughts on the Mike and JD show. I did hold back a bit because I knew we were doing this. But what were your overall thoughts on the series?
I thought that it was well produced. I thought the camera work was very slick. I liked the aesthetic. It was very gray. It was very monotone gray in the background. So I thought that was super interesting how they pulled that off. I thought they had an interesting selection of subjects. I thought Dave Meltzer stole the show.
Yeah.
I thought he was far and away the best interview. I thought Cody Rhodes is the biggest worker I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
The guy that rallied people like, we own pro wrestling. Like I heard that at the original All In back in 2018. Now he's like, oh, a sports entertainer, and I'm just the term of sports entertainment. It's like, my God, you have just no ethics whatsoever. So that was my thought. On the whole, I will be honest with you and say I was bored to tears for the vast majority of this documentary. I'm not the audience.
Yeah. And you know what? And that doesn't surprise me that you're a bit bored, because they rehashed a lot of history that guys like you already knew about, and guys like me already knew about. And we had to relive certain eras that we didn't really like. We've relived them so many times in various documentaries, not only WWE produced ones, but Dark Side of the Ring had done all of these recently.
I am so sick of the Attitude Era. I'm so glad that we've had such a microscope put on the attitude, the quote unquote Attitude Era, to realize how bad it really was. Like the good news about all these documentaries that I've had to watch over the last decade plus about this is like, there's no stone unturned. Every memory I've ever had has been relived, and I can look at it not with rose-colored glasses, but with a stark sense of reality. And I can go, man, everything that wasn't Steve Austin or The Rock was really bad.
And even some Steve Austin and The Rock was pretty bad too.
Yeah, agreed.
So that was one. So I had many takeaways, and we'll get into the takeaways from the documentary. But some of the takeaways was, and I felt this way during the Monday Night War series on Vice that I just didn't think was very good at all. And for them to kind of rehash some of that stuff was like kind of eye rolling. But there were just so many different moments that I'm just like, that is my childhood. and what they were doing is absolutely disgusting. I loved every minute of it when I was a kid, but I look back on that with like kind of with a bit of shame that I enjoyed it so much. And I think Triple H said, well, who is worse, the people doing it or the people yelling and loving it? And I would say I was a child, so I don't think I should be held accountable. But my parents sure did let me watch all that stuff, and not only that, they encouraged it, bought me T-shirts that said "sucking" on it. So they don't think they did a very good job. But I would say there's a lot of bad people, but the WWF was mostly the worst.
Mike, are you trying to tell me that Paul Levesque was refusing to take responsibility for something?
Yes. Yeah. I think he kind of put the blame on the audience for loving it so much.
Boy, I'm shocked to hear that. I don't know, man. Like, and I felt I was a little older than you, so I watched it, but I kind of at the time was like, this is stupid. Like a lot of the massage, like I was a weird guy. You know, I married my high school sweetheart. So I'm like, the misogyny and stuff like that. I didn't love it in the era. Because again, I don't know, I'm just different like that. I guess some wuss or whatever you want to call me. So like, I didn't love that, but I mean, like I did enjoy the storylines at the time.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it was so cool. I think what I liked about was like, for a brief time in the Attitude Era, being a wrestling fan was cool again. Like when I was in junior high and most of high school, I didn't tell anybody that I was watching wrestling until my senior year when it started getting cool. When everybody wanted to watch wrestling, I was like, yeah, I watch it all the time. I know. And I became, oh yeah, that's JD. He knows all about that stuff. And then I wasn't a pariah anymore for that. So, I mean, like, I did enjoy that aspect of stuff. But I mean, at the same time, you go back and look at it, it's like, man, this is kind of terrible. Like, and I hate and the ruthless aggression. Like, why do I have to watch John Cena talk about the ruthless aggression? And I was there for that. I was actually in the arena. That was in Chicago, and he did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I saw they do a lot of cool stuff in Chicago. We're spoiled as fans, but like, I don't know. Did I have to watch that? Like, did I need 45 minutes on Austin versus McMahon and 2 on Jimmy Snuka and Nancy Argentino?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I understand why they would do that, though. I went into the documentary not thinking that they would even touch on hardly any of that stuff, and I was happy that they touched on damn near everything, and they left a couple of things out, but they actually touched a little bit on everything.
No, here's where I disagree with you. Why did they have to do that? Why did they have to spend a good chunk of it making Vince, the WWE, and by proxy Vince McMahon, the underdog babyface? What was the purpose of that?
I don't think they made them the underdog babyface. I think they did a good job of calling bullshit on him being an underdog babyface.
They do call bullshit.
He got the opportunity to say that he was the underdog babyface, but then they cut to people calling bullshit on it, which was the point of the documentary.
But at the same time, we spent time establishing that. Did we need a whole episode? 2 episodes on from Montreal to the Attitude Era? Did we need that? Why? And here's where I'll push back on this: is the fact that it became the history of the WWE documentary. That is not appealing to people that are outside the bubble. That is appealing to people on the outskirts of the bubble. Like if our wives were going to watch this show, and I'm going to steal this take from Joe because he was right about this.
Yeah,
I don't think they're interested in John Cena talking about ruthless aggression. I think they're far more interested in episode 2 and what the only time you get to see the real Vince and what he was about was everything going on in episode 2. That is where the interesting stuff was. But I think Bill Simmons buries all that in just history and doing a history of the WWE documentary, which is there's a bazillion of those. And I think they do a disservice to their audience by focusing on that rather than, because it's 2 and 6 are the only times you get a look at like what I think normal people would be interested in.
Yeah. Well, I think the Netflix audience, with all the documentaries that they have on there, I think they would be pretty intrigued by the more salacious stuff.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I understand why they went with the history of wrestling part of it, because I think that's what the documentary was about. Like, it was about Vince McMahon. I think that was the point of the documentary. It's like, hey, we're going to tell the history of Vince McMahon. While we're doing it, we have to they felt that they had to tell the history of the WWE because the two are synonymous. So I kind of got that. I wasn't clock watching on the different scandals, because I think they could do a whole series on just the scandals and probably do a much better job than what Vice does. But I don't think they'll ever get I don't think they'll ever get access to the footage again. I don't think that that they'll ever be able to do anything like this again. So it's kind of like, and I think Joe and Rich hit on this, and I'm pretty sure Dave hit on this, and Bill Simmons even hit on this. It's like, hey, this was the goal of the docuseries, was to tell the story of Vince McMahon. We were going to try to touch on the other stuff, but we'd tell the history of the WWE at the same time. And then these other stories just kept popping up. And then we kept digging and digging and digging and pulling back the layers of the onion. And so it just, the whole thing became a mess. I thought they did a good job with the issues that they were facing. And I thought in episode 6, they ended it in episode 6 where Vince McMahon, I don't think he could have looked any worse, or Bruce Pritchard or the WWE.
I agree with that. Now here's again, they're like, oh, Bill Simmons like, oh, it could have been 10 episodes. It could have been 3. It could have been 3. Like, in reality, the traditional audience doesn't care about the history of pro wrestling, or else they would be pro wrestling fans. This is where I differ with a lot of people and I know I'm humble brag. I've done this.
Yeah.
I've done this. I know what happens when a story takes on a life that you didn't see. And the answer is you chase the story. And I don't think they did that. I think that they were more interested in playing paint by numbers because they had something and they could have sat on it and they could have gone to make something more salacious or just, to be quite frank, more interesting. And they chose not to. Like, you could have had a whole episode on the steroid thing. You could have had a whole episode on the ring boy thing. You could have had a whole episode on Rita Chatterton. Instead, they pushed it all into one. Like, it was like, we're going to get all this scandal stuff out, but look how awesome Vince and WWE. Yeah, he lies a lot. But I mean, like, it was far more of a glorification. And then all of a sudden, you got to throw Dave in there calling out their bullshit.
Yeah.
But it was it's like Vince is awesome. Vince awesome. Vince awesome. Vince awesome. Vince is full of shit. Vince is awesome. Vince is awesome. Vince is awesome. Vince is full of shit.
The people that kept calling him awesome were the ones kept getting bullshit called on him. And that's I really like that part of it, because you never see that in any type of. Now WWE removed their affiliation from it. They allowed the footage to go through. But you just never see that in any, like, you've never seen anything like this with their footage being licensed and getting this much access with these people being able to say bullshit on them.
That ain't true, my man. We saw Behind the Mat, which was plenty of that. Vince didn't like the other, and we also saw Wrestling with Shadows, which is still since those two documentaries, and I see all of your points. They could have just made a more like a true crime documentary as opposed to a history of wrestling and a history of Vince McMahon documentary, but that's just the way they went with it. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, and again, this is the degree in media messaging. Like, you have 10 positive to 1 negative. What's going to stick out? You know, yes, you pay. It
depends on what the negative is.
It depends on the negative, but I mean, I do think the vast majority of people up till episode 6, if you make it past, God, if you can make it to episode 6, I do think that you think that Vince is full of shit, but he's super successful and did good for wrestling. The best line in the whole thing, which I know you're going to talk about to me, which the one you said, I want to hear your reaction to, is when they ask Vince about WrestleMania, right?
Yeah.
When he says WrestleMania wasn't good for the industry, but it was good for my business, and that's what I care about.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the line. There's another one I thought you meant too, where they call Vince out on his bullshit about Ted Turner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's poaching it. Well, and he straight up says, if I do it, it's fine. If it's done to me, I don't like it. How I think and how I feel are two different things.
Yeah. And Bischoff did a good job calling bullshit on that. And I didn't think that he would. And I was happy that he did. And I understand the pushback on the length. I understand the pushback on retelling the history of it. It didn't bother me, but I get why it bothered other people. I thought they did a good job making Vince out to be a full of shit rapist monster by the end of it, right? Which I think was, look, I know not everybody's going to get everything that they want in these things. I know a couple of people that wanted a complete bloodbath and they didn't get that. I get that. I know some people, I know at least one person that wanted it to be what it was, but without the salacious details. They wanted to celebrate their fandom of WWE and Vince McMahon, right? There's those people out there too, right? Which is why Bruce Pritchard was so upset in episode 6 whenever he had seen it. He's like, you guys just ripped Vince to shreds, because I feel like they did. I feel like they did. And I compared this one to OJ Made in America, the ESPN documentary that I loved. I thought that one, I thought they're pretty similar. The way they did it, they told the history of OJ Simpson in chronological order. And then what did they end it with? They did 10 positives to 1 negative, or probably 3 negatives because he had issues at UCLA, but they kind of talked about how he's this great football player, one of the all-time greats. He's actually a great announcer, did all these great commercials, was in the Naked Gun series, but oh yeah, he is a serial abuser, and then he murdered his wife.
Here's the difference with that, though, is that OJ Simpson is OJ Simpson, right? Vince McMahon, I think a lot of normal people don't really know the full extent to what Vince McMahon is.
Yeah.
And I think that Vince McMahon, most people think he's just a carnival huckster wrestling guy, right? But I don't think a lot of people realize just how filthy he is. Right. And that's
they do now.
I think they do. Yeah. But at the same time, like everything was squeezed into episode 2. There's so much bad baggage that this man brought with him. And they jammed it into one episode. But I had to get 2 fucking episodes about how great WWE was. And Attitude Era was so awesome. And Ruthless Aggression and all this stupid fucking shit that only appeals to wrestling fans. A normal person doesn't give a flying fuck about Ruthless Aggression. A non-wrestling fan doesn't care about, Montreal. Like they don't like that subject has been scrutinized more times. And I think that they lost the plot. I really do. I think whereas OJ Made in America, because the heinousness of those crimes and how well known it was, there's a dark undercurrent to the entire documentary. Like there's a shadow that hangs over every scene of it that's not present in this one. Like it just isn't. It just isn't. It doesn't feel nearly as dangerous.
Yeah,
like large chunks of it, not the whole thing, but there are chunks of it where they try to do. They're a little more WWE propaganda than I would be comfortable. Now they do call bullshit on it, but it's the vast majority of it is not bullshit. The vast majority of it is them flinging the bullshit at you, and then the bullshit gets called out. But at the same time,
the vast majority of it is what happened on television.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's
so it's not exactly bullshit. It's like the stuff did happen. They're just like retelling it.
And that's where I take my issue with it, is that like 6 episodes. I think they wasted their time with silliness. Like I did like the episode 3 where they start with the Spider Lady screw job and they bookend it with Montreal. I'm like, okay, that's actually okay, kind of cool. That's bullshit too. That's 100% a bullshit story. Wendy Richter was offered a new contract and wanted an agent to look at it. That's why she got fucked over. And if you watch the thing, it clearly, they're working. Yeah. The post-match fight isn't Brett having a fit. It's a work, and you just steer into the fucking work, and nobody called bullshit on that one. So I was a little, it's a little too pro wrestling.
I wonder if they even asked Dave about the Wendy Richter one. Because that screw job isn't like you and I know about that screw job. I don't think anybody else knows about that. I think everybody that's ever been a wrestling fan knows about the Montreal screw job. I mean, everybody over the age of like 20,
right?
Would know about that one. But I would say that most people probably don't really know, but I think they use that to set the table for what was to come, because ultimately the screw job was the impetus to create the Mr. McMahon character, and they were kind of like here's Vince the person, here's Vince McMahon the character, now we got to decipher who the person is versus the character, and the truth is they're one and the same, and I think that's what they ultimately got at.
But we had to take 2 episodes to figure that out.
Well, yeah. Well, and then they're also telling the history of WWE. I agree. We didn't need Ruthless Aggression. We certainly didn't need Brock Lesnar beating Undertaker at WrestleMania.
Yeah, what was that about?
That was so much time on. I was just like, why? Why are we doing this? But I think it was because I think they just thought that was a huge moment in wrestling history. I legitimately think that, and I think that John Cena becoming a superstar, Brock Lesnar defeating Undertaker was a huge moment, and then of course they parlayed that into the Roman Reigns era, and they sped that up, and then the final episode is everything that you just watched doesn't mean shit because this guy's an evil guy.
And that's what I'm saying. Is like a normal person watching it doesn't give a shit about the Undertaker's streak. This is why wrestling's so stupid. Like he was undefeated at WrestleMania for 13 years, or whatever. Like it's a work, man. It's a fucking work. Like,
What
and
do you
then
think
people,
about
oh,
what do you think
God.
about Vince's line about he didn't think Undertaker was concussed, he just had a blackout moment because he didn't want to lose.
Here's what I think. I think Vince believes that.
Yeah, I do.
I
I
think
do too.
I think he's such a worker himself. I mean, how can you not when you how can you not be a jaded person having to run a professional wrestling promotion your entire adult life? Like,
Yeah.
and you're working with like these people are liars. This is one thing that this documentary teach you is that never trust a single thing that comes out of the mouth of anyone who is a professional wrestler at any point ever. They lie constantly.
Mhm.
They can't help but lie. They don't even know. They're so into the lie that they don't even know the truth anymore. It's like Costanza. It's not a lie if you believe in it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that
Yeah.
Vince thinks that. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. Like, it's just, it was so unimportant. Like, the Undertaker's streak came to an end. Every time I hear a wrestling fan talk like this, I want to be like, do you have balls? Like, are you a rational human being? The fact that you're crying over a worked match? Come on, dude. Like,
I feel that way every time I see somebody on Twitter using cry face emojis over something like over anything.
oh,
Like it really is the worst. I can't remember what it was recently. Somebody did cry face emoji about just somebody appearing on AEW, and I was like, I just replied to them like, "Why are you crying?" Just like why would a grown adult? I assume you're an adult. Why would you use a cry face emoji over somebody showing up to work?
yeah, exactly. Like, I can get moved by fiction, right? I've read
Yeah.
books that have like knocked the wind out of me. I've seen films that have just taken it out of me emotionally, and like I really felt it. Like, I'm an emotional dude. I'll be the first to admit it. I have never cried in a professional wrestling match in my entire life. Like, nothing
Yeah.
has ever like I've been excited. I love watching it. I just I can't fathom crying.
I
I
never
can't.
I never cried during a match, but when Owen died and they did the Raw tribute the night after,
Different.
fucking dude
Totally.
wrecked me. And the same thing when Eddie died
Eddie.
and they
Mhm,
did
me too.
Eddie because I had just seen him at SmackDown in Fresno with my best friend. We went and watched it together, and then like a year later, the dude's dead. It fucked me up.
Here's a confession. I don't know if I've ever told anybody this. Um, I cried at the Benoit one because by the time that show had ended, we knew the truth, and they
Yeah.
put together this video to Finger Eleven's One Thing
Hmm.
that knocked the wind out of me completely
Same.
because we knew the truth by the time that aired, and I saw these videos of this father loving his son who murdered him,
Yeah.
and the choice of song, like it just it was I couldn't watch wrestling for a few years after that.
Dude, that one screwed me up too. I saw Benoit like 2 weeks before he died in Rolla, Missouri, in the main event, and there was like 1,000 people there. It was like a small like sea town there. Like Rolla, Missouri is like halfway in between Springfield and St. Louis, so it's like
Mhm.
super small town. It was at
I had,
that college there.
I had a buddy who played college football there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we saw him, and I was living in Japan at the time. I went home to go visit family, to see my cousin graduate from high school. So I flew home, saw him graduate, went to a wrestling show, flew back, and then like a week later, he had died. And the shit happened. And then when we got it in Japan on the Armed Forces Network. So we didn't get it until like a day later because they would send us the tape for free. So we would watch it. It was Tuesday Night Raw where we're at because we're like, whatever, 13 hours ahead.
Mhm.
And so then it would get like on an 8-hour delay. So I had already knew everything at that point by the time I'd watched Monday Night Raw. They didn't pull the tape. So all of us in Japan that were watching it, and I assume there was quite a few people on base that were still, because it was pretty popular at the time, watching it, we knew everything. Like it was all like, I'm watching like Nancy Grace an hour before Raw comes on the Armed Forces Network, and I got to watch that. That fucking took me out.
Did I ever tell you about the time I met Chris Benoit?
No.
Okay. So summer of 2001, leading into this, I had herniated 2 discs in my neck in college, my sophomore year of college wrestling. My arm, I was in a match. I was actually in a match, and my arm went dead, and it was really weird. And I'm riding legs, and you can see my arm kind of dangling, and then it feels okay, and I'm like, that was really weird. So I kept wrestling through it. And after Thanksgiving, I lost 16 pounds in 18 hours to make weight. I wasn't supposed to wrestle. I dropped a shit ton of weight. I won. I was great. The next day in practice, I threw an underhook, and my arm went numb. And this time, it didn't come back. So like, and it was days. I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to lose my spot. But I was wrestling bad in the room because I couldn't move my arm. And I had a match. We had to meet, and I got my ass kicked. And I was out dinner with my dad, and I was bawling because I'm like, I could not, like, emotional up and down. This was the same week that I cut all the weight. I went from the hero to the GOAT. Like, and people were like my college coach was like super disappointed in me. Like, it was wild. And so I went to the doctor. Turned out I had 2 hernia discs in my neck, and they wanted to fuse my neck together. And my trainer, I was like, let's do it. I'll be back by Midlands. I'll be back 6 weeks. No problem. They're like, oh, no, you'll be done. And I was like, holy shit. And then our trainer's like, you're 20. You're not doing that. Like, we're just going to rehab you. So I did. I spent 6 months in physical therapy, moved up in weight class, really muscled up, changed the way I wrestled. And that was the same year that Chris Benoit hurt his neck in the ladder match with Jericho. And I think it was Triple H and Steve Austin or something like that, where he blew his neck out. And he did get the fusion surgery.
Yeah.
So that summer, he was doing a tour for WWE because he was hurt. And he was at the Bally's in my hometown. So my brother and I were like, let's go meet Chris Benoit, because we were huge wrestling fans. So we went to I went to this taco place. I had these 2 big ass quesadillas before I knew I had celiac disease, which is the funny part of the story. So we're in line to meet Chris Benoit. And have you ever misinterpreted a fart?
Oh yeah, shart.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Oh, yeah.
I let a fart go next in line. I looked at I was like, yeah. I looked at my brother and said, I have to go to the bathroom right now. And he's like, are you okay? I'm like, we'll talk soon. And I went to I'm like, I shit my pants. And I had never done that before. I'm like, I can't believe this happened to me. So I got rid of my underwear, cleaned my ass in the bathroom, and went back in line to meet Chris Benoit. And like, there's a picture of me and my brother and Chris Benoit where I have no underwear on, but I don't tell nobody that. So like, this was years earlier, and I was jokingly, because I don't know how to process that, because he was my favorite wrestler. And I was going to talk to him too. I was like, I had this big thing I was going to talk to him, like, hey man, I had the same injury as you, but I didn't fuse my neck. And I had like in my head, I scripted this out while I was going to have this conversation and this connection moment with Chris Benoit. And I said, hey man, I herniated 2 discs in my neck, and da-da-da. He's like, did they have the surgery? I said, no, they just rehabbed me. They said I was too young. He like goes, you don't want the surgery. It fucking sucks. Signed my fucking thing. And that was it. And I was like, oh, okay, let's get our picture.
Yeah.
So I like
so funny.
I was like a preface at the time I met a serial killer and shit my pants.
Yeah. All right. So since you told the shit your pants story, now I gotta.
Oh yeah.
We'll get back to now. Since you started, we're doing that.
Now we're telling war stories. Yeah, let's do it.
So in Missouri, before I had joined the military, I didn't start drinking until I was 20. I had never had a sip of alcohol. I had sips, but I never got drunk till I was like 20. It was I just didn't want to. Yeah, I just didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm,
well, but once I started drinking, I was like, "Fuck, this is what I'm doing now." Like, it's like the moment. It's like Frank the Tank. The moment it hits your lips, like that was me, right? So we're out and about, and we're drinking, and I think I was popping pills at the same time, just totally bad. And we're eating Taco Bell and this and that. We're out and about, and we're going creeking. You ever gone like back roading and going to creeks? Creaking? So we would just drive down back roads, listening to music like Hootie and the Blowfish, and just like fucking whatever. Eve 6, Inside Out, like just screaming at the top of our lungs. So we go down in the back roads and we just go out to creeks, right, and just fuck off and drink beers and do all that stuff. So, but we get out there and no toilet to be seen. And I gotta go, but I'm like high and drunk at the same time, right? So I go and I just pull my pants down in the woods, and I shit into my pants because I'm just so fucked up. So I'm just shitting, and I just shit into my pants. And I looked down, and I was like, oh, shit. And so, I had to do the whole thing. I had to toss the underwear out, and then like I had to put the pants in the creek and wash them out. And then I had it because like I can't get in the back of my buddy's truck butt naked. So I had to so just wear wet pants, clean them out. But yeah.
Dude, I've had that.
And that's so funny.
It's such a humbling. There's no more a humbling moment for an adult man than to poop your pants in public and have to just live with the fact that you just shit yourself.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
It's legit the worst.
It is legit the worst.
Speaking of shit, let's get back to the documentary. It's so funny because I'm just a fan of history documentaries, and so even if they tell me stuff that I already know, it doesn't bother me. But I think if your goal going into it, and I know BJ was not happy with this thing because I think he wanted it to be kind of more of the true crime type of stuff. But I got that they were trying to weave true crime in with the history stuff. And I thought the way they ended it, I felt like the goal was reached, at least from my expectation, the goal was reached, because by the end of that thing, you did not have a high opinion of Vince McMahon. You had a way worse opinion of him. If you didn't know much about him, you only knew him as like the funny guy on TV. And you were kind of like a little bit of a wrestling fan from when you were a kid, and you probably hadn't watched it in a while, but now that it's on Netflix, you're picking it back up again. Like, I think that you would go in, there's like, he's probably the most horrible human being that was like you've ever seen on television, right? He'd be like up there with all the different monsters. I feel like that's the way they ended it. That's kind of what you would get at. Even David Shoemaker said this guy's probably like a really terrible human being. And we've just been seeing him on TV for all these years, right? So I did think they ended it that way. I think in episode 6, Bruce Pritchard couldn't have looked any worse. So now he's going to get a little bit of an out because he was saying all those nice things about Vince 2 days before the Janelle Grant stuff came out. And you would probably assume that maybe Vince has a mental stranglehold over him, just like he has one over The Undertaker and several other people that have ever worked for him. They all have he has a stranglehold on him where they all look up to him and they think that he's infallible, right? And I get the feeling that they believe he didn't do anything wrong with some of those people. Bruce Pritchard might be one of those people, but if I were WWE after this thing came out and how bad he looked, I would take a hard look at whether or not he needs to be in that company anymore.
I would say something about Triple H. We had a friend. Again, we have our friend that we know we don't like to out him. He posed a question to us in our text chain about, do you think Shane McMahon was the one who dropped the dime on the Wall Street Journal?
I don't. I think it was Stephanie. And I think in episode 6, they kind of hinted at it, to be honest with you.
I thought so too.
And because, at one point, one guy that I didn't think was any good in this documentary, by the way, I got more annoyed by him than anybody else, and it was Paul Heyman, with his just over the top delivery on these fucking stories. And especially the story that he told about being at dinner with Vince and Shane, and Vince handing Shane a knife and saying, if you want this company, you got to stab me in the heart. I think he wanted Shane to do it literally. And I think Stephanie McMahon did it like, in a different way, a bloodless coup, I think is what she did.
That's always been kind of what we've speculated on, because she was out and then that happened and then she was back in, right? It was very, there's something, I definitely agree with that. Shane seems to be the one who always strives for Dad's approval and never gets it.
Yeah.
Whereas Stephanie had the approval, and like my brother and I have that same relationship. We had that same relationship with my dad, where we've been digging through a lot of shit with grieving this year with him, where like I was the oldest and I was like the one who always sought that approval from my dad, and like rarely got it because he wasn't like very good at expressing his emotions. Where my brother was always like, fuck him, I don't need him thinking anything about me, like it was always. So I kind of got a little bit of those vibes from that, and I could totally see what you mean. I thought that was an interesting text we got from our friend, because I don't think that Shane has that in him.
Well, he tried it at one point, and that's why they fired. That's why they told him to get out of the company, but he didn't do it. I don't think he did it like the way that Stephanie did by leaking to the media. Like
I mean, like she went for the kill. He just he didn't commit to it,
Yeah. It's so funny. I was watching News Nation a little while ago, and it was at the time when the Democrats were trying to get rid of Biden, right? Mm-hmm. And they Chris Cuomo, who does a pretty good show on there, he had a Democratic donor on, a multi-millionaire guy who I think he owns a furniture store or something like that. He's kind of like a Mattress Mac type of guy, but he donates millions of dollars every year to the Democratic Party and to certain campaigns. So he brought him on. He had known him. I think he probably donated to his brother's campaign in New York. Mm-hmm. And he said the greatest line when he was talking about Nancy Pelosi. And he said, the Democratic Party needs a shark, right? And everybody wants to be a shark until it's time to do some shark shit. And Nancy Pelosi is the only one willing to get blood on her face. And I think that was Stephanie McMahon. I think Shane McMahon tried to do the coup, but he didn't want to be a shark when he did it. I think he tried to do it in a professional manner. And Stephanie was like, look, I got to get rid of this guy because he's going to tank the company. We're going to try to salvage this thing because they were going in the wrong direction, despite the fact that they were making record profits based off of their TV deals. Business was actually declining. Ratings were declining rapidly. Ticket sales were declining. All those things were going in the wrong direction. And who knows if they would have got this Netflix deal if he had stayed in the company that kept going down this path, right? And so I think she did some shark shit. I think she was like, fuck it, we're just going to leak this to a board member. Or it might have been her. I got contacts with the Wall Street Journal. She knows all those people in New York. She ran that company for a while, or ran that side of the operation anyway, and just went for it.
I would agree with you. That's a great call. I'm going to start watching you and Mel talk about News Nations. Made me actually super curious to start watching it. So you've made me a super News Nation curiosity seeker. I love that line about Nancy Pelosi because that is an accurate statement about Democrats in general.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
So fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I don't think Shane. I think he might just be too nice of a guy. You know?
Yeah. And Shane's the one that everybody likes.
That's what I'm saying.
There's a reason for that. And
yeah,
and I think that's what and that's what Tony Atlas, who I thought was really great in the show.
He told my Pekka.
He tried to grab my Pekka. I was like, oh dude, I gotta tell another funny story about Pecker.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah. Well, it's not what you think. Oh. So we had this chicken in our yard, and it was like laying eggs. It actually laid eggs in my daughter's stroller, like in the basket underneath. And so my daughter was actually going out there and feeding the chicken and taking care of the chicken, and we had to put it to the side so nobody could see it because you're not allowed to have chickens in the neighborhood. They just run free.
Is this in Hawaii?
It's Hawaii, yeah. Free range chickens out here. So, but you can't feed. You're not supposed to feed them. You're not supposed to take care of them because then more will come, and they bring diseases and all that stuff. So they don't want too many in the neighborhood. And if they get too many, they rehome them. I think they eat them, but they tell us they rehome them. But okay. So she was feeding it, and my wife goes, "Well, what's your chicken's name?" And sure enough, she calls the chicken Pecker. And I was like, Ashley, we got to tell her that chicken can't be called Pecker because she's going to go walking around the neighborhood talking about Pecker this, Pecker that. Like, we can't have that. She's going to go to preschool talking about Pecker. I was like, no, we can't do it. And so we had to tell her, I was like, honey, that's a bad word. And then she started crying because she felt like she did something wrong. I was like, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just the name. You can't use it. Well, what's the name mean? I was like, well, don't tell her that either.
Oh, see, I would have straight up told Andy what it means, and he would have been laughing his ass off about it.
Yeah.
She might have made it worse. He might have actually steered into the skid at that point.
Yeah.
Oh shit, parenting.
So,
that's a good story.
Yeah, so funny.
But yeah, Tony Atlas is great. Shane, probably too nice a guy to be in this. You know?
Yeah.
Vince, not a nice guy. No. Here's what's interesting. Did you know? Last year I read the Abe Reisman, I think is his name.
Abraham Josephine Reisman,
that's what it is.
The female,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I read their book, and shockingly enough, it's a more sympathetic portrayal of Vince McMahon because they go into in their book, they go into Vince's childhood, and they really unearth a lot of the traumas that Vince had, where he was sexually assaulted in a movie theater by some older girls when he was like 10.
Yeah.
And they also talk about this is from their book. So I'm not unearthing something, but they allege that Vince might have had an inappropriate relationship with his mother.
I think at one point during the documentary, Vince did bring up the word incest. He said abuse and he said incest.
Yeah.
And then later they talk about the storyline between him and Stephanie.
Yes.
And I thought that was fucking weird. Right. And like the storyline itself is weird.
It's weird. Yeah.
But then if you know about the history, if you know a little bit about the history, no, they didn't explore it in the documentary, but he did say the word incest, I believe. And so I was like, I think he's talking about his mom and there being some incest there. So, and then for him to present that storyline with Stephanie, I'm not going to speculate anything, but it makes more sense to me why Stephanie would be the one to stab him in the heart than Shane.
So oftentimes when we're creating, right, when you're a creative person, you're working through your traumas, you're working through your baggage in your art, right? So I can sympathize with that. And like I said, in this book that I read, they talk about how Vince grew up in North Carolina, with his mother and his stepfather. Vince grew up with Vinnie Lupton, which they don't even say that in this documentary.
Yeah.
He didn't become Vince McMahon until he moved in with his dad after high school. Right. Like he was Vinnie Lupton up till then. He was a Carolina hillbilly kid, which is funny. He was abused, physically abused by his stepfather, and pretty much they insinuate sexually abused by his mother. And like, I think the documentary does a better job the book does a better job of establishing the why this guy is a monster. And I'm not saying like you have to have sympathy for the devil, because I mean, I think that weakens the devil in some cases. But I think here, having that extra bit of knowledge, it kind of does a better job painting the picture of why. Like, and I think it makes you more apt to believe a lot of the effed up stuff he did, because like you kind of get a clear vision of what this guy really is and how warped his sense of morality and reality truly is. Because when you watch WWE programming, specifically from the Attitude Era, you can kind of get the unvarnished real Vince McMahon. And a lot of it is filtered through the eyes of Vince Russo, another messed up individual.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot, like you said, specifically the Stephanie storyline, like there's a lot of like the Katie Vick stuff. Like a lot of that was Vince pushing the envelope to get him to do, you got to get on that dead body and go, it's a fucked up individual. And like, I'm not saying you should have sympathy for him at all. Like, I can't stand the man, but I do think that it would have done a better service to this documentary. And I think that having that information early on helps paint a better picture of the man that we know him to become.
It could have been something that they weren't able to verify.
Possible.
Some of the information, but they had Vince saying the word abuse. And I believe somebody could fact check me on this, but I believe he did say the word incest. Maybe I'll have to go back and rewatch episode 1, but I did remember him saying that. Now he didn't say incest by who. I don't know that it was the mom. I don't think they said that in the documentary, but Reisman definitely says that in the book.
I would have interviewed
at least alleges that maybe they were like, I don't think there's enough for us to go on, so they just didn't go with it.
And well, they also had the support of Vince at the time when they started this thing. So, and he even says like, I'm not going to tell you guys the truth. Vince, like they have Vince on camera saying, I'm not going to tell you guys everything. He's a surprisingly guarded guy for a guy who's not very guarded. Isn't it a weird thing to say? But it's kind of true. Like, again, that's the wrestling thing. You're in constant work mode.
So one thing that we didn't get into on Thursday that I thought was hilarious, and Twitter was pretty upset at me, which is pretty normal.
Shocking to hear
and
that.
Dave Meltzer, I was on his radar. He quote tweeted it. So the line in the first movie and the first episode where Linda McMahon talked about how they were able to buy the company, where Vince Sr. essentially gave it to them and they paid it back with profits from the gates. Over the course of time, they said they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And
love that.
And I love that, but I knew that already, right? Mm-hmm. Like David told the story. It had been out there for a long time, but they never said that the story. They always said that they bought the company from the dad. Now, technically they did buy it, but they were essentially gifted it. And the previous owner just got to keep the profits for a little while, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that is still a business transaction, but it's not the picture that people paint of Vince McMahon and his purchase of the territory all these years later.
Oh, no, it's much closer to what Tony Khan did, which the WWEites are very anti. They like have this. Again, this is Vince's crafted interpretation of his own background. Like they love to say, "Oh, Vince just bought the company from his dad and and interest-free loan that he could pay back whenever." Like So I did like that they said it. I forgot about that. That's a great call, Mike. I do like that the truth was finally exposed by Linda McMahon of all people. What did you say on Twitter that pissed people off? I missed this.
I said that essentially. I said it's pretty funny that they said this, and it kind of ruins the perception of WWE fans. It's probably going to piss them off. And I got a lot of people in my replies like, that's just a smart business decision. Why do you think that's not a good thing? It's like, no, it is a good thing. Like that is a smart business thing, but it's not anything that he like earned, right? Like he didn't start a business and then he didn't even go get a loan to buy this thing off and have to pay the loan down over years. He just got the company handed to him while his dad was still working there, and then just gave him the profits for a little bit to him and all his partners. And that's all that happened. And it was a smart thing to do. He had the vision for it. He was a great businessman. Don't get me wrong. There was nothing nefarious going on there, but it wasn't what they made it out to be.
It's not. I mean, like when you look at how Jim Crockett took over the territory, his old man Jim Sr. passed away. The brother-in-law was going to run it, and he did a shit job. And then Jimmy Jr. had to pick up the pieces for the family, and wound up making the company super profitable. Like that's a more honorable story than what really. I mean, like he got a gift from his dad, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong. Yeah.
No, but here's the problem is that like that is portrayed as a negative when it's the guy who happens to be half Pakistani, but it's a great thing when it happens to be the rich kid from New York.
Well, I honestly
tell you about how you spin the story.
Yeah, well, no, I honestly think they're probably going to go back on what they think of what they're saying, what they've always been saying about Tony Khan having his dad purchase a company for him. Now that they know this information about Vince, because it was the most profitable territory that there was. It was the most successful territory. It had all the biggest towns: Baltimore, New York City, Philadelphia, Boston,
Pittsburgh, Boston. Yeah. Look at the territory, man.
Yeah, they had all the biggest. They had the biggest money. They had the biggest crowds. They were the most successful territory, and he got it handed to him because his dad was ready to get out, and he took it over and he made it bigger than anybody could have ever imagined. Right? Those things are all true, but the origin story isn't what people think. They think, oh, he was the self-made man. It's like, no, he got handed the most successful wrestling company in the world. That's it. That's it. That's and there's nothing wrong with that. However, what you believe about him is not true.
Like, no, you could compare it. Like, I hate to get political on this show, but I am for a second. Like, Donald Trump is the same thing. Donald Trump inherited his father's company, but we've seen how many times that he went bankrupt and how he actually would have made more money if he just put the money in the bank and left it alone. Yeah. And how he actually has because of his biz. Like, say what you want about Vince McMahon and Donald Trump. Vince McMahon is a far better businessman than Donald Trump ever was. That's just the honest to God truth. Like, as far as taking what you do and becoming successful at it and keeping the money that you made, right? Vince had a fairly upward trajectory for the most part of his business, right? That ain't the case with the other guy.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's the story that we present that surrounds it. It's the propaganda that we build around these things. Like they become iconoclasts in a sense.
Well, Vince has only ran one successful business, and it was the WWE.
That's also true. But he was really good at it. Now, again, what I hate is people like Vince. Wrestling would be gone if it wasn't for Vince McMahon. And that's like, why would you say that? Like, that's just
wrestling. Wrestling was stronger before he took over. He killed wrestling and made it into a one company place because there were so many territories all over the world. I'm all over the world. I'm not talking about the US. All over the world, and his takeover killed those territories. They were thriving, selling thousands of tickets a week, and he took all the top talent, killed their territories, and now you can't get thousands of people a week in the same territory unless you're in Tokyo or Mexico City, and that's it.
You know how you know that's true? Because Vince McMahon told you that in his documentary.
Yeah.
Vince says it himself. Memphis used to draw thousands of people a week every Monday at the Mid-South Coliseum. You can't do that anymore anywhere. You can't do that anymore.
Like other than Mexico City and Tokyo.
Tokyo, yeah. In Tokyo, they just have tons of wrestling shows everywhere across the city. Tokyo is just different. Like, that's the truth. Vince McMahon, in a lot of ways, what he did help WWF and WWE and crush pro wrestling. But people don't want to admit that. Like, wrestling was super, super strong in the 80s. The boom of wrestling didn't start with WWE. They just the ones that reaped the benefits of it. Like, wrestling just got hot in the early 80s because of cable TV.
Yeah, and they are the ones that capitalized on it. They did it. They did it the best, as far as promoting and things like that. And they ended up the most successful. Now, if Vince didn't expand, I think other companies were already trying. They just didn't have the vision that he had.
100%. I mean? Only was trying, didn't have the vision. Fritz kind of dabbled in it, didn't have the vision. Vern was trying, he didn't have the vision. Now, here's the thing people always say Vince's way is the only way it could have succeeded. I disagree with that. I think that if Vince had different philosophies on wrestling, because all Vince did was he ran his father's territory pretty much the same that his dad did at first. Like 84 WWF has the DNA of WWF, right? If Crockett had that territory, if it was the Crockett territory and Jim Crockett Jr. had that specific territory with all those towns, would his vision, if he had the same vision as Vince, would they have taken over?
I think I think that Hulk Hogan was such a generational talent
I agree with that.
that it really as much as I love Ric Flair, I just don't think that Ric Flair would have been able to do with what Hulk Hogan did, because Hulk Hogan's charisma just translated into pop culture more so at the time than Flair's did. Now Flair has, like, all these years later. I just think that I think that just Vince and Hogan just had this magic about them together in the way they promoted it. And look, Hulk Hogan was very much a product of the Ronald Reagan era. Like, it was just like big muscles, big action, pro America, pro USA, all that stuff. I think it was just the perfect magic. And that's not me taking anything away from Flair, though.
No, I think the flip side, I think if Flair has that machine behind him, and I think that's the thing with Hogan, it's Hogan was the right guy in the right time for that machine. But if Vince's philosophies were Crockett's philosophies, right? Could he have done that with Flair? Because Flair is also the quintessential 80s guy. Flair is, Gordon Gekko with a robe.
Yeah, that is
right?
true. Yeah.
So I think that if I truly believe it's the machine. Now, Hogan was the perfect thing for what Vince wanted to do. If Vince had, like I said, if Vince had more pro wrestling, traditionally based sensibilities with his ideas of promotion, because that's really what made it successful. It wasn't the wrestling. And that's what I think the misnomer that people have been convinced for years is that you need to be like Vince to do this. But the truth is, Vince just did what he wanted, what he liked about pro wrestling. I think that if you had the muscle behind it, because that's because Crockett didn't have the vision, right? Nor did they have the money. But Vince had that East Coast money, that Northeast money. I think if Crockett had that Northeast money and that base and that vision, I think with Ric Flair, because you could tell me Ric Flair in 1986 didn't ooze confidence of himself. You think that you couldn't have put him on Johnny Carson or David Letterman and having people eat out of his hands? You know what I'm saying?
I think you could. Look, when I say that it had to be Hogan, I'm not trying to downplay Ric Flair, because Ric Flair, like, if I had to pick between the two, I'm picking Flair all day, right? I just think that just Hulk Hogan was just so huge, so over the top. But I think you're right. I think one thing that WWF also had that Crockett could have never had, besides the money, was the New York media market.
100%. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If Vince's sensibilities were Jim Crockett's, like if Vince McMahon booked his territory the way Jim Crockett booked his territory, if it was more of a sense of wrestling, but then he put the pizzazz into it, could it have worked? Because I think that's the idea now, is the only way wrestling can be big if it's the way that Vince did it. And I don't believe that. I think Vince just had the marketing push.
He did.
Because wrestling was popular. Wrestling was very popular in other parts of the country. And Crockett there was times when he was neck and neck before he just, business-wise, he just wasn't the businessman Vince was.
No.
And I don't think
he was just way overspending and just doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting question. I think we should probably pose it to our buddy. Because I think had he, maybe if he booked, and I know what you're talking about, like just better matches and hotter angles. Mm-hmm. It's kind of what Crockett was doing. Could he have been able to do that? I think so.
I think so too.
I think so, because back then, people, like, even WWF fans liked good matches. Like when they would throw, Tito Santana out there with Macho Man Randy, like, those matches were good. A lot of times the finishes weren't, but the matches were always really good. Or Bret Hart versus Ricky Steamboat and those types of matches.
Let's go to the early days of Vince Sr. or Vince Jr. Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid. Yeah, that was a WWF match. That was a Madison Square Garden match where they had no idea who those two were, and by the end of the match, they were cheering them up and down. Like, if you put that on MTV along with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper, why doesn't that get over? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think it could. Here's a question. They brought this up in the documentary, and I was wondering if you had ever heard this before.
Oh,
when Vince took over, and he immediately wanted to get rid of Backlund. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people wanted him to get rid of Backlund. Backlund, people were sick of him. The fans were sick of him. The newsletters hated him by that point, by the end of his run there. And he said that one of his early ideas to get the belt off of Backlund was Dusty Rhodes. I had never heard that before. Had you ever heard that?
I had not. Vince says it, so I have to believe he thought it. Dusty has that really hot run with Graham in 78. Thank you. Yeah, I wrote about it for WrestleJoy. Yeah, he has a real hot run with Dusty in 78. That actually stretches. They ran the feud in WWF, and they ran it again in Florida. So it was hot. Could they have gone with Dusty? They could in that time. Now, here's the thing too: is Vince is talking about 83-ish. So by 83, Dusty is already in the process of he's booking Florida. He's about to take over North Carolina. He's about to take over the Carolinas. So I just don't think the stars were aligned because Dusty wasn't interested in coming in because he was going to run the show. He was going to run Crockett. Like Starrcade is his idea, and that's that's Backlund. It's the end of Backlund. So Dusty wouldn't have worked because of what Dusty became in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I could see him wanting to go to Dusty. I just never heard the story that Dusty, like his original idea was Dusty. And then when he found out Hogan was available, Hogan wasn't available. Hogan just wasn't under contract. So when he went for Hogan instead, but he said that one of his early, I think that if he could, he would have gone back to Superstar Graham, but Graham was just shot by that point.
He loved Graham.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Hogan. Hogan is Graham, but Hogan was Graham, but Hogan was better at being Graham than Graham was. And Graham has a great, like, people undervalue how successful Graham was as WWE champion in 77 and 78, right? The money would have been in turning Graham babyface.
Yeah.
And not in putting Backlund with the title. Because, like, it's funny too, because when Backlund becomes champion is when the WWF undercard is at its best. Because Vince Senior has to do all this extra stuff to get asses in the seats because it's Backlund. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's when he brought Dusty in. That's when he brought, like, Pantera. That's when, like, they were bringing in guys from all over the place to try to make these cards really freaking cool because he just, you know, Backlund was kind of like Vince Senior's, like, early Roman. Like, remember how Roman was in, like, or like maybe Cena. Right, because you know Cena didn't click with the fans.
Like it was Cena. Like after a little bit, of pushing him down your throat, he got sick of him. Yeah. Well, they saw that about to happen with Roman, and they were like, "We're not going to let you." And so Roman didn't get over until he turned heel.
Right. So you could kind of compare like what Backlund was to like what Roman was at kind of the end. Like it was just actually it's a pretty good comparison. Actually, what Vince Senior saw in Backlund is like very much what Vince saw in Roman. Vince just didn't book Roman right until Roman turned heel. Like the first like half of Roman Reigns is, you know, dominance is him as a failed babyface. So it's super interesting. I think that I think wrestling is a different place if Backlund doesn't get that ridiculously long title run.
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, I think so. I think wrestling's a different place if they just, like you said, flipped Superstar Graham babyface, because who knows what would have happened with him? Like, who knows if his life would have turned out the way that it did? Because, well, like losing the belt really affected him because he felt like he could continue to go and continue to contribute, but they took the belt off of him because they had already had it in their head that they were going to go to Bob Backlund because they thought Bob Backlund was going to be their next Bruno, and he just never turned out to be that.
No, I mean he drew. You can't say Backlund wasn't drawing. They kept the belt on him for too long.
Yeah.
They should have taken the belt off him in like 80, 81 and went with like Snuka or something like that when Snuka was real high.
Yeah, but I don't think they could have gone with Snuka because he was, you know, I remember Piper talking about Snuka because Snuka was the top babyface in the company, bigger than Backlund at the time. And he was like so mad that they wouldn't put the belt on Snuka because Snuka was the guy. And he's like, it made no sense. And then you find out what Snuka was up to. And it's like, that's why they didn't put it on. They couldn't trust that guy with the belt.
No, you're right about that. But at the same time, like they could have just taken it off him. It's not like WWF didn't have guys that held the belt for like 3 days. Ivan Koloff has the belt for a week. Stan Stasiak holds the belt for like a weekend. Like they could have absolutely swung it around if they wanted to. Like, I get the point that you wanted the champion to be the guy, but they had transitional champs. The Iron Sheik has it for a month, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it's
they didn't want to book Backlund versus Hogan. So
no, and they would have killed Backlund. Like it wouldn't have worked the way the transition, it worked. Like that's actually pretty well booked, to be honest with you. Like you can get on 84 WWF booking, but that's not a failure of it at all.
No,
you know, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about who, if they don't get Hogan, who could they have gone with?
Yeah, well, and I think Dave talked about it in Wrestling Observer Radio that you know he also had never heard that Dusty was a guy that they had thought of. Who they really wanted was Kerry Von Erich.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Hogan was the best choice, but if they couldn't get Hogan, I think they would have tried. They had been trying to get Kerry Von Erich for years, but like talk about Snuka, like Kerry Von Erich was up to some shenanigans at that time too. He couldn't have been trusted either.
Kerry had in-ring charisma. Kerry could not do the stuff that they had Hogan do.
No.
Kerry didn't have that level of charisma. You know who they could have gone with, who was actually in the company at the time, who was the number 2 babyface in that era, Slaughter.
Yeah. I thought they absolutely could have gone with him, but I think then they ended up they had already went to Hogan by the time they had the dispute over G.I. Joe, right?
Oh yeah, no, Hogan's yeah. And I'm saying like Slaughter's the number 2 babyface in '84.
Yeah.
When Hogan has his run, Slaughter's running those other towns
Mhm.
during Hogan, like the boot camp match with Patterson and Slaughter. That's during Hogan's reign, and Hogan's not on that show. That's just Slaughter. And
Yeah,
Slaughter,
Slaughter was the heel at that time.
no, Slaughter was a babyface.
Wasn't Slaughter heel against Patterson?
I thought Slaughter was who's
Slaughter?
the boot camp
Slaughter
match?
was the heel against Patterson.
The
Slaughter
second-
turns babyface against the Sheik.
Yeah, the second boot camp match, not the first one
Yeah.
with Patterson. The other one is one where Slaughter's a babyface, and like Slaughter's the number 2. Like that's why Slaughter gets the GI Joe run,
Yeah.
is because he was that popular. Like he was the number 2 babyface in WWF at the time, and that's only '84 into just beginning the '85. So I mean, you could have Slaughter is a guy they could have gone with, and then like maybe things are different because like you think about how popular you have to be to have Hasbro reach out to you to go, hey, we want you, and then to continue to be popular when you're not on WWF TV. Slaughter was a national star on Gagne's TV and running indies. Like that's how I think we discount. I think because of how bad his career ended, people kind of forget just how hot Slaughter was.
He was insane. And his career did end on a whimper because he went to AWA, and then at a certain point, AWA just stops drawing altogether.
Oh yeah,
the company's in shambles, and they're doing the studio wrestling. They were doing pandemic wrestling with fake fans before it was cool.
That's in '90. Yeah, that's
in like '90, and then they brought him over. What did you think about the section where they're talking about the turning Slaughter heel and doing the Baghdad War? I thought they handled that one pretty well.
And they handled as good as they could. Vince trying to say, "Oh, we had a hot angle." It didn't. It didn't draw. Vince is convinced. I think Vince has convinced himself. I think they handled that as well as they could have.
I felt like by the end of it, like you got the impression that it was a really bad idea and it didn't draw, right? And I think because you had the truth tellers, but I might have to go back and rewatch that episode again because I'm trying to remember. I think even Pritchard on that said that it turned out not to be a good idea. But I really remember him defending it on his podcast and even continued the bullshit line that the reason why they left the football stadium, Olympic Stadium, sorry, they left the Olympic Stadium to Sports Arena was because Slaughter was getting death threats. Now I assume that he probably was getting some death threats.
I believe that.
But I don't think they moved it to the small arena because of the death threats. I think they moved the small arena because it didn't draw.
Yes, I believe Slaughter was getting death threats in the fall of 1990 and the winter of 1991. Mike, do you remember how long Desert Storm lasted?
So what, a week and a half?
Like a week and a half. The war is over by February. Yeah. WrestleMania is in early April. So I mean, it was over. And then the fact they went with it up till SummerSlam.
Yeah.
Like Vince he just loved those, like just like his old man, just those, xenophobic tropes. Like it was a bad idea. And the amazing part is how long they ran it for.
Yeah, because it really didn't draw, and then they just kept going with it because they just had this idea. And they're like, oh well, people will get behind it eventually. And then they completely killed Slaughter's career after that because they turned him babyface in '92, and then he was just completely done at that point.
But he also retires at that point. Like 92 is his last year in the ring, and by that point too, Slaughter used to be really athletic. Like you watch those matches in the early '80s from the Mid Atlantic stuff and the boot camp match and all those kind of things. He was an athletic, moving dude. He could work. He could bump. Like Slaughter was pretty awesome. By '90, he's not pretty awesome anymore. Like he had gotten fat. He worked a lot of indie shows, the AWA. So he wasn't doing stuff. He was very happy with his GI Joe money. I spent money on a video when I was a kid. I think I might have gotten it for birthday. It was Sergeant Slaughter and a bunch of dudes I don't know doing a tug of war with Bigfoot. Not the monster, but the monster truck.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I spent that was a big thing when I was a kid. That's how over Slaughter was him and Bigfoot managed to sell out of this major VHS thing. So that's never discount how over Slaughter was.
Yeah, no, he was super over. He was, of the '80s. It was as far as like names from wrestling that kind of transcended pop culture, it was Hogan and Slaughter
It was, and I
at,
think
at the time
I
because
think
because of the show.
I think what hurts Slaughter is that championship run.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. But man, we could talk about this shit
Oh, yeah.
forever. But we've already gone over our allotted time. But I was anxious to hear your thoughts on the documentary, so I'm glad you were able to watch it. If for those of you listening to this and you did get a chance to watch it, drop a comment and let us know what you thought about it. I'm curious to see what other people think about it too. I think this is going to go down as probably the biggest wrestling documentary like ever.
I agree. Mhm.
Because of the platform that it's on. And so when people think of wrestling documentaries, they're going to think of the McMahon documentary, and it's going to be telling the history of McMahon, history of WWE, and then also, touching on all the scandals that happened with him, and probably leaving a lasting impression that this is like a horrible human being. So, I think that's where it ends. Eventually, once this Janelle Grant case is over, I don't think Netflix does an addendum to this, but I think like a legitimate news outlet or maybe a different platform is going to have to do more of a true crime style documentary. And I just watched a really good one on the Night Stalker on Netflix. That's really good. Richard Ramirez. I thought they did a really good job on that one. Talking about like, they actually went into his childhood and kind of explained like, hey, maybe this is why this guy was the way he was, right? But explaining the manhunt, explaining how they got to where they're going. There's another one coming out about the Zodiac that I'm really interested in. So I like the true crime stuff too. So I hope that we get a true crime version of the story, but I think they have to wait to find out what happens at the end of it before they can do that.
We're still probably a year or two away from wherever this thing winds up, and there could be some more twists and turns in this whole thing before it's all done.
Yeah, because, I think eventually some of those NDAs that got signed and some of those wrestlers, I think those are going to come out and those people are going to get the chance to tell their stories eventually. And we'll see what happens with that. But somebody that's really good at the true crime stuff needs to follow up on this.
I agree.
But hey, guys, that is going to do it for us on Overtime. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The next thing I want to do, JD, I have two ideas.
What's that?
I want to do the Hogan Flair 94 series.
We've been kicking that.
Yeah, we've been kicking that. So I want to do that. But on the WWE Vault tonight, they did 1 hour from the Omni, WCW or NWA in the Omni from like 1987. Unfortunately, they only did 1 hour. They only had 1 hour of the footage, and they actually didn't get to Barry Windham versus Ric Flair, the 60-minute draw that happened on that night. But I think it's still really cool. So maybe if you get a chance to watch it, maybe we'll just talk about it on the regular pod this coming up week. And then next time we're on Overtime, we'll just do the Hogan and Flair series.
I think that on the regular pod this week, we should talk about the Hall of Fame and do an overview because we got the ballots. I think for you and I think we need to work through this and like really, I don't want to just vote because I feel like we've been given like a legit responsibility. And like,
I'm going to do like legit research and then,
I think we should talk about it because I don't know how much our audience is super in tune with what Dave does in the Observer because I think we got a lot of Impact fans and a lot of them don't love. Like I think a lot of them think Dave slights Impact sometimes. So I don't know how much. I think we need to educate our fan base on what the Hall of Fame ballot looks like and how things have to be done. I think we owe that this week to our fan base.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely cover the Hall of Fame. But I would like to do a separate episode that is just about the Hall of Fame, where we're talking about our ballots, kind of like what we did last year.
So we should absolutely. We should absolutely do it. We should do like that should be like a thing. We should absolutely do an episode on this year's Hall of Fame, going over the ballot, and then we should actually do our research, come back, and before the ballots are due, we should do who we're voting for, and like we did last year, try to sell each other and like make each other defend our choices.
Yeah,
maybe bring news on to tell us that we're stupid.
Yeah, I think we'll introduce the ballot this week. If you get a chance to watch the Omni thing, great.
I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna do it. I'm probably just gonna as soon as I'm done here, I'm probably just gonna go watch it. So if you get a chance to check it out, then maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, and then whatever else the news is out there this coming up week. Next time on Overtime, Hogan and Flair series, and then at some point before the Hall of Fame ballots are due, we'll do a full blown Hall of Fame show, and maybe we'll try to get a guest or two. I think
I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, man. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here on Patreon. Thank you for being subscribers. I greatly appreciate you. That's going to do it for us this week. And until next time, mahalo.
I want to see something really scary.
Do I have everybody's attention?
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.